And this afternoon I have been entrusted with the very special duty of introducing you all to this lovely session that will soon ensue, and the speakers and the moderator. As you all might already know, this session is called Women and Nature, Stories from Feminine Lives, wherein 5 very empowered women will discuss writing, gender, ecofeminism, and what is it to be a woman writer working together with nature and environment, and they'll share with us certain very useful nuggets of wisdom. We're immensely honored to host Ms. Maitri Devi Sisodia. I'll start introducing the panelists, and I request all of them to please take the seats here on stage. We are immensely honored to host with us Ms. Maitri Devi Sisodia, who is an engineer by training. She spent a while working at a reputed national firm before becoming the deputy collector for the government of Gujarat, for she wished to be a change maker in the true sense of the word. Since then, she has had a great impact in the domain of civil service, having worked with dignitaries no less than Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. Ms. Sisodia is also a writer, known for her work Contemporary Cheer Haran, and is currently working on a poetry collection. We're also lucky to have with us here the very established author, activist, and journalist Kusum Chopra. Her books, Mastani, Nirbhaya, and Others Who Dared, Beyond Diamond Rings, Silver Dreams, Rishte, stand as fitting tributes to the strength of the feminine spirit. Her path-breaking stories have appeared in The Week, Rajasthan Patrika, Hindustan Times, Sakal, Maharashtra Times, Deccan Herald, The Current, Freedom First, and other weeklies and journals that are very reputed. We are also graced with the delightful presence of Dr. Kaveri Purandhar, a researcher and founder of Pretty Much Everything, Rendezvous and Reviews with Kaveri. She is a freelancer involved in emceeing, vlogging, blogging, moderating for events. Kaveri ji is a proud mother of a 9-year-old. She likes to read, write, eat, travel when time permits. She claims to be a people's person and wishes to grow with each passing day. Shreya Yadav, respected young speaker and a PhD scholar, holds an LLM in international trade law. She aspires to work for the noble cause of upliftment and empowerment of women and is well on her way to becoming a civil judge. The session shall be moderated by Ebha Singh ji, who is a senior advisor for digital health of UP. She has been an IT professional in the past and was awarded recognition by the prestigious ICANN Foundation as one amongst the top 100 aspirational women of the year 2021. She has conceptualized and founded the initiative of Ghar, Ayye, Nanhi, Pari in order to facilitate parents of newborn females under the able mentorship of Dr. S.K. Nanda, retired IAS officer. Now, without any further ado, we can begin the session. Over to you, Ebha ma'am.
Thank you so much for a lovely introduction and for all my beautiful panelists. I hope so everyone is comfortable. Okay. A world after a world and after a world, when it is written in a piece of a paper, it's a power. Women are inherently artistic, and when it comes to women and literature, a lot of artistic creativity is required. And of course, women by birth are blessed with that artistic creativity. In India, women writer has given a new dimension in the literature. So I would just start with my most honorable Kusum madam. Why should women write more and more?
Personally, I feel women should write more because of late, not only of late, perhaps since we started recording history, men have taken a lead. And look what they brought us to. We are on the edge of total annihilation, right? All over the world. And it is not that they are more intelligent or more capable than women. History has shown us, especially now when we are digging into the artifacts and finding old ancient writings done by women which have been kept hidden for fear of being destroyed, that women have thought far further. And who would be a fiercer fighter than a woman who has produced children from her womb? So I don't see why women should not write more. Why should we not write more? And plus, this is another tangent that we have to consider. Men have been writing. We acknowledge that. What about ancient women? The women who sang songs and lullabies and tales on which both you and your sisters have grown up. And that has given you the foundation of your knowledge. Right? Now that the things are going wrong, it is the women writers who can be entrusted with giving an about turn. I can give you several examples of what things have gone wrong. I'm basically a storyteller, so I'm not very technical. But I can give you numerous examples of what is going wrong from the mythologies which are now being unearthed, which turn around the stories of our venerated gods, Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahadev. That they were at a stage, had to bow down to their consorts, to Saraswati, to Parvati, to Lakshmi, because they were offering them advice which made more sense. And who are writing those tales? It is women writers. So why should women not write more and discover the truths which have been hidden at some stage in our history so that men could retain an upper hand? And that upper hand has been misused. It is leading us to disaster. I'll give you one example of a modern day disaster. All of us in our childhood have read stories written by Enid Blyton, the British writer who gave us so many lovely stories, not only of Noddy and the wishing chair and the famous five and such tales, which really expanded our thought and our imagination. Now in Britain, several men have gotten together to demand that Enid Blyton's books should be reviewed because she has a very narrow vision. She has made a black gollywog. Why should the gollywog be black? She has created creatures who are looked down upon by the other children. So she's being, anti-black or anti-brown. And because in that very famous series of the famous five, there is one girl whose name was Georgina, but she wanted to be called George. And she used to prefer to wear shorts than skirts. So they are arguing that all Enid Blyton books should be rewritten by somebody else to eliminate all such references. And then only should English children be allowed to read them.
Thank you so much. Coming towards you, Maitri, you are a civil servant, administrative officer. क्या आपके मन में ऐसा आया या किसने आपको इंस्पायर किया that you should write?
I think the will to write is something which is inborn. Yes, there are people who help us along. I will always be grateful to my school teacher. In my senior years, Mrs. Mahabaleshwarwala was a wonderful human being. Possibly she recognized that I would be able to write when I grew up. So she really took special pains to hone my writing skills.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Coming towards you, Maitri, since you are a civil servant, administrative officer, what inspired you that you should write? And about what? क्या लिखना चाहिए आपको?
A very good afternoon to everyone present here. It is a pleasure to be sharing the stage with this distinguished panel today. To answer your question, I was a writer much before I was a civil servant. So I used to write for magazines back in Ahemdabad. I am, as mentioned, I'm an engineer by education. But even in those days, I used to write. And the credit I would give for having this creative faculty is to my grandfather, Mr. Himmat Singh Sisodia. He's he's a retired English professor. He is my biggest cheerleader and still the hardest critic that I have. So I would give him the credit. Growing up, I had a lot of influence from him, and that's how I got introduced to the world of literature. And writing is cathartic for me. I mean, initially I used to not publish a lot of things that I used to write because there was this inhibition. You have self-doubt, right, when you're expressing. It's a very intimate process. You are giving out your thoughts. But gradually I have honed the skill, and now I feel that I'm at a stage where I can share my writing. And my purpose of writing is not just to be creative and express myself creatively, but write in a way that can exact some change in the society. So the maiden book that I have co-authored with my friend, that is about women's struggle and all the issues they face and how they relent. How they not relent in the face of unrelenting challenges. So just the gist of it, yeah.
That's very nice. Dr. Kaveri, coming to you, you are a medical writer. So what makes you to choose this?
Okay, तो सबसे पहले जय हिंद and I'm Dr. Kaveri. सभी को नमस्कार, good afternoon, and my huge regards to all my co-panelists. So medical writer तो हूँ, certified that too by profession, but then I think any form of art, कला का कोई भी रूप एक थेरेपी होता है, भले वो राइटिंग हो या पेंटिंग हो. So I think being a woman, it gives me some sense of mental peace. And also कि जो human mind है ना, it's a complex thoughts of cobwebs, just like a cobweb. तो ये जो thoughts इधर उधर जाते रहते हैं, तो बहुत ज़रूरी है इसको एक सही दिशा में channelize करना. You know, you have to channelize your creative energy in a very, very right direction. So for me, it's a form of, channelization. And जो एक शब्दों के रूप में मैं इन्हें पिरोती हूँ, भले मेरी कहानियाँ हो या भले मेरी कविताएं हो, and I write it down. तो ऐसा कहते हैं कि जब आप अपने मन की बात, जो आप किसी से कह नहीं सकते, अपने शब्दों के द्वारा एक simple paper और पेन में लिखते हो, rather than typing on a laptop, which is not my style. So एक पेन और पेपर उठा के जब लिखती हूँ, the thoughts are so clear. Not only talking about a creative writing, but in fact I make my to-do list every morning that I get up. मैं एक 9 to 5 जॉब नहीं करती, आई एम अ फ्रीलांसर, बट स्टिल मैं वो भी लिखती हूँ जो मेरे घर के काम होते हैं. सो आई डोंट नो, इट गिव्स मी सम काइंड ऑफ सेटिस्फैक्शन. एंड मैं जब अपना वाइट बोर्ड देखती हूँ कि अच्छा ये भी कर लिया, तो अंदर एक इतनी संतुष्टि होती है कि माई डे इज़ डन. So similarly, writing, if you see my debut book, Raina, A New Dawn, which is actually a love story, fictional, लेकिन it's not a love story जहाँ पे it is kneel down and rose दे रहे हैं, कोई I love you बोल रहा है. No, it's a love story that raises question on a lot of illogical social stigmas. So आप लिखिए, लेकिन आप जो भी काम कर रहे हैं अपने लेखन के द्वारा, उसको इतना इम्पैक्टफुल बनाइए कि वो समाज में एक डिफरेंस क्रिएट कर सके, लोगों की सोच बदल सके. कि अगर 10 लोगों ने आपकी किताब पढ़ी है, आपने जो भी लिखा है, उसमें से 3 लोग भी आपकी सोच से सहमत हैं या अपने जीवन में वो परिवर्तन ला रहे हैं, yes, your writing has worked, your writing is impactful, and at this point satisfaction actually it leads over the marketing, the sales and everything. So write more. To write more, one has to read more and write impactfully. इसीलिए मैंने ये चुना.
Beautiful one.
Thank you.
Now coming to you, Shreya, since you are the youngest beautiful panelist, since you are a law student, वो rules बनाना, rules implement करना, what makes you inspired to write?
Okay, is this working? Hello. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, namaste to all the very much experienced here on the panelists. So, how have I been honored? So in that way, law as such is, I think so, it is jointly a bundle of human senses. Okay, it's like what we have inherited since the ancient times. So whatever laws have been made, like even now if they are being made, or since ancient times, they have been connected with the human emotions, the human actions persisting today. So as such, whenever there is a case going on, or wherever there are emotions, a judge always tries to point it out with a shairi or with a literature gist to it, with a judgment when it comes down to it. So I had this, I always used to read Justice Krishnan Iyer judgments, and he used to write so beautifully. So reading to his judgments, I myself was like, I am an admirer of writing as such. I write, but to be honest, it's pretty much anonymous way. So hearing today, I think I got this courage. Now I will start writing or publishing my books, or publishing the short poetries I've written since younger age. So yeah, so as a law student, I have always find the inspiration from the judgments or from the books, because being a law student, when I was, when our teacher used to teach, so they used to say us that the emotions as well as the human manner of whatever there is a working of the human society is always connected to the law implemented today. So yeah, that's my answer of that, how law is an inspiration for me. And being a law student, I'm also proud to say now that I am also a writer.
Yeah, you should always be proud. That's very nice, Shreya. Coming towards you, Matri, why do we enclose women writing as a separate category? I mean, we never say male writer. Do we like that?
I think just the fact, like Kusum ma'am started off that, you know, women writing, why women should write more. The narrative, the actual experience of life that women face, it started on much later, right? Even in modern history, like forget ancient history, even in modern history, women writers used to use pen names as men because it was considered like, it was similar to, it was tantamount to an act of prostitution for women to sell her words and earn money from it. So that is ghastly. I mean, we are just talking 100, 150 years back. That is the reality. So I think there is a need to identify that, okay, these are the set of women writing. It might essentially not be, you know, on what women narratives or women issues. It can be a general piece of writing as well. But just the fact that we were very late in getting to this, where women could express themselves in a creative way at the same leg as men, I think it is essential that we identify women's studies or women writing as a separate branch.
Coming towards you, Kusum ma'am, how seriously women writers are viewed in context with Indian readers? Indian readers.
Hello. Well, I know that Indian readers do have a very soft spot for Indian writers as well. Although many think that it might be down market to admit that. But if you look at Indian writing by women across the board, women are writing not only on technical and scientific subjects, but they are addressing a whole range of other issues, history, geography, economics, international affairs, because as women get more and higher education, they also go into research, and then they do publish their findings, which are always garnished by a hidden feminine thought. That is what I have found in most of women's writing, that even when they are discussing economics, it is not as hard-boiled an egg as when men write about economics. Because inherently, we will think as much about home as we will think of the whole country. And that gets reflected. But in India, women's writing has taken a huge leap in two directions. One, of course, is romance. Romance writing far outstrips any other writing by women. I think because it has the largest market. You see, the way that our civilization has evolved, it's only in recent times that women can express their love to their husbands, you know, verbally or openly. Earlier, it was always in the shadows. So women find extreme pleasure from reading romantic books. So the romantic books have a huge market. Not only sale across the counter, but then there are these, in every society there's a circulating library and stuff like that. So a lot of women gravitate into that arena. And the second stream which is going forward now is women who are delving into ancient mythology and pinpointing where things went wrong for women. And they write those stories. And those stories also have a very wide market. As far as romantic writing is concerned, well, I can plead guilty. I have written a romance myself. One of my novels which was mentioned, which was called Silver Dreams, is actually the story of a romance between a 70-year-old and a 60-year-old meeting in a retirement home, and how they managed to bring the two families of children together. So, I mean, if I can write a romantic book, I can imagine any writer writing a romance.
But ma'am, don't you think what's the written in the book, जो romance किताब में होता है, क्या वास्तविक में वो जीवन में होता है?
होता है, बिल्कुल होता है.
वास्तविक जीवन में नहीं होता, इसलिए लोगों को पढ़ना अच्छा लगता है कि
I can vouch for it. I had a runaway marriage myself.
So you are a lucky person.
But actually, what my co-panelists have said, कि जो हो गया, bygones, we cannot change that. अभी एक एक्टर कुणाल खेमू ने एक बार कहा था एक्टिंग के मामले में आउटसाइडर्स के लिए स्पेशली कि मैदान बराबर का दे दो, खेल हम खेल लेंगे. लेकिन अब यहाँ देयर इज़ नो सेक्शन लाइक मेल राइटिंग, फीमेल राइटिंग. आई बिलीव मैदान खुला हुआ है, जिस राइटर को दम लगा के खेलना है खेल लो. इट इज़ लाइक दैट.
That is the beauty of today.
Very well said. इस पे मुझे वर्जीनिया वुल्फ who wrote in like 1850s, उन्होंने उस टाइम पे बोला था, any person who writes they cannot think of themselves as a purely man or purely woman. She said androgynous tendencies, it should be a manly woman or womanly man when you are writing. So what you said just hits home, that it is now an open field, and there was a need then, but now I think we are past that.
See, Kaveri, for my Silver Dreams on Amazon, you'll find, I think, about 10 or 11 reviews, half by men.
Oh, wonderful. And also for the fact that we all female writers are sitting here and discussing the topic itself shows that the readers have accepted writers, irrespective of the gender. So I think this is very evident.
Definitely, we have author and senior journalist, we have administrative officer, we have Kusum ma'am, and we have medical writer, we have a law student, and of course myself as IT person.
Oh, yes.
So that's very nice. Coming towards you, Shreya, since you are a law student, so अगर आपको एक female के लिए law पे literature लिखना है, क्या लिखोगे? Or what will be your first preference?
Okay, first of all, I have immense love for Justin Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of the very higher-most justice. She passed away recently, last year only. So yeah, see, there is a discrimination here as such till the time we are talking. And I was reading a United Nations report on the UN Women's. So there the report said that the gender inequality will be stopped till 2035. But seeing this, the struggle or the staggering position of the women today, it will continue till 2095. The report says, I am not the one quoting it, but yeah, so looking at it, I think discrimination lies, but it depends upon situation to situation. So I was privileged one, and I think so in some way Justin Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been a lot of inspiration for me. She was a privileged one, but still she had her struggles, and as a law profession or as a law student, what kind of struggle or what kind of chaos we have to divulge into it. So by looking into it, I can only write about what my struggles were, like looking at the reports of the law commission, or looking at the reports or the case laws going on, or the judgments who are dissented. Like as such, I am a woman, but there have been a discussion or debates on the adultery, a controversial unconstitutional one. So I can only write as such upon the case laws or the dissents or the lives of the other judges. So now, right now, we are having like 4 justices in the sitting bench on the Supreme Court. So I think so the change has been occurring and change has been going on constantly. But yeah, the struggle since still lies. That, and what I said is that it will stop when the questions right now regarding discrimination or the gender inequality stops. So yeah, that's my
So
answer. I think
do
so.
you really think that gender equality cannot come before 2095?
I think so. It will also come on to reduced one, but yeah, I think so. Till 2095, there is no scope of gender inequality going away from our world as such. So there was this report which said that 2030 will be the last time that gender inequality topic will be said, and the questions will be asked, or the women have to protest regarding it, or there has been ongoing protest also. But yeah, the report says as such that the gender inequality still lies. It will be stopped till 2095.
I think when we talk about gender equality and achieving it, it's important to address gender roles. 1000 साल पहले it made sense because physical strength was the key then कि ये gender role fixed थे कि घर का भाई public sphere is taken care of by men, the home is taken care of by women. Right now we celebrate the fact that are working women, they take care of home, they take care of work. Do we not realize we should not be glorifying this? Men should also be they should equally start dividing their household responsibilities also. So I think like Shreya said, it will take some time, but we are getting there. I'm glad there is some conversation on this front now that men are becoming aware. In western parts of the world, this has been adopted, but apne yahan abhi bhi it is strongly rooted that even if you are a working woman, you should be the one who's caregiving at home or who's taking care of the kids or the elders. So jab tak ye thoda hamara nahi balance out hota hai, tab tak I don't think we can say that we have achieved gender equality, but there is hope because now there is conversation, the change is taking place. And the whole story of women's right has been like a constant change and progress. So we all hope that before 2095 nahi, hum usse bahut hi jaldi pehle hi achieve kar le. That is my sentiment also.
Definitely. So coming towards you, Dr. Kaveri, आप तो सुबह उठना मन में जो ख्याल आया उसे पेपर पे लिख देना. अगर ख्याल आता है कि why should women write more and more and what the impact it should create more and more?
ओके कभी कभी मेरे दिल में ख्याल आता है कि मैं जितनों भी मेरे मन में शब्द आ रहे हैं वो लिख डालूं एंड बिलीव मी वो शब्द जो भी आपने एक कविता लिखी है या छोटे से कोट्स भी लिखे हैं वो कब आगे जाके बड़ी कविताओं का रूप ले ले या बहुत ही स्ट्रॉन्ग इम्पैक्टफुल कहानियों का रूप ले ले आपको खुद पता नहीं चलेगा. दैट इज़ हाउ आई हैव रिटन माई डेब्यू बुक एज वेल. बट देन यहाँ पे माफ़ कीजिएगा अगर इफ़ आई एम गोइंग ऑफ द ट्रैक बट देन हियर आई वुड सी राइटिंग ओनली एज अ फॉर्म ऑफ आर्ट. आई एम नॉट रिलेटिंग इट विद एनी जेंडर बिकॉज मोर देन जेंडर इक्वालिटी राइट नाउ इंटेलेक्चुअल इक्वालिटी की ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है इन एनी फील्ड. सो यहाँ पे मैं सिर्फ राइटिंग की बात करूँगी एंड आई मीन मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि हर एक का अपना एक इंटरेस्ट और एक इंक्लिनेशन होता है. सो आई वॉज ऑन सबैटिकल बाय चॉइस एंड वो जो 5 साल का सबैटिकल था व्हेन आई वाज टेकिंग केयर ऑफ माय चाइल्ड पोस्ट माय पीएचडी वो टाइम पे मुझे ऐसा लगा कि मैं लिख भी सकती हूँ. फिर वो जब लिखती चली गई सोशल मीडिया पे थोड़ा थोड़ा शेयर करती चली गई. बहुत सारे सोशल मीडिया फेसबुक ग्रुप्स का पार्ट बनी जो सपोर्ट करते हैं स्टोरी टेलिंग को. वहाँ से ऑफकोर्स फीडबैक आता है. Those feedbacks are not any kind of validation for your work. They do not give any credibility. लेकिन वहाँ पे बहुत सारे genuine readers हैं जिनका feedback आपके लिए बहुत ज़्यादा मायने रखता है. उसको आप बहुत ज़्यादा positively लें and खुद पे और भी ज़्यादा काम करें. Do not polish or write yourself only to prove it to others. You write it for yourself. कोई भी कलाकार अपने लिए काम करता है दूसरों के लिए नहीं. तो जब आप अपना काम खुद पढ़ते हो शाबाश मैंने क्या लिखा है जब तक वो फीलिंग नहीं आती आई थिंक वी शुड नॉट
that every woman should write.
बिल्कुल every individual should write, every woman should write because as I said writing is a form of therapy. वो आपके मन की भड़ास आपका frustration अगर mentally if you are going through a low phase सब कुछ एक बाहर आ जाता है. आपके शब्दों के द्वारा. So I think we are more in a happier space when we express ourselves, be it verbal or be it in writing. So that is why writing acts as a therapy, and बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है कि ये हम therapy ले लें in some form of the other.
That's very nice. Sure, ma'am, please.
इसी बात को आगे लेके मैं ये कहना चाहती हूँ,
certainly in South Asia, so Bangladesh and of course India. But Australian literature is very interesting in terms of this topic because of course Australia was colonized by largely the British, I guess you'd say. And in doing so, it kind of set up the colonization of Australia, of course, disrupted First Nations cultures of Australia, it's a very dark history to bear. And of course, First Nation cultures had their own literature, but it was not written down. It was an oral history passed to, within groups. So when the white settlers came to Australia, of course, they imposed their own culture on various aspects, on the environment, on economics, on health, on all of these things, including literature. So Australian literature, of course, there's a vast unmapped territory in Australian literature. Then there is the white settler literature. And this is people known as the bush balladeers, people like Henry Lawson, Banjo Patterson. So if you ever study Australian literature, these are the names that would probably come up as, the first Australian poets, for example. And they did write about the environment and evoked the environment and often drew comparisons between urban spaces and what Australians called the bush, which is essentially the forest, and of course includes the desert and the very vast differences of landscapes in Australia, which of course India has as well. And I was reading an essay by an Australian poet, Caitlin Marling, where she writes about Australian colonization, and she says that when English came to Australia, it was very difficult because often there was no language to describe Australia. Like English, of course, described an English landscape, but when it came to coming to Australia, it became described in a foreign language, essentially, not the languages of the people, of course, whose land it was originally. And this is very evident in the poetry of these white settler poets, the bush balladeers. And of course, in recent times, there has been a great upsurgence, and rightly so, of First Nations writers who are, to some extent, reclaiming their right to speak about their country and the very spiritual and organic ties they have to the land, because of course identity in a lot of First Nations cultures in Australia is tied to the land. So this is coming out in contemporary Australian literature. So we see this kind of, I wouldn't say decolonization, but certainly an acknowledgement of the poets of Australia, who of course were the First Nations people.
I think more ways than one we share the history. Like even India was colonized, and we have a similar sort of literature, so can totally relate to that. Anyone else?
Well, I obviously have hello everyone, sorry. I obviously come from a different background, coming from France, having been, not proud to say it, but a colonial power, so that's a different perspective. When considering the topic of nature as represented in French literature, I think it somehow fits a lot of stereotypes about French culture as being a very romantic country. And I started digging into my childhood memories when I was at school, and literature is a very important part of our curriculum in France. And the only thing I remembered was this 17th and 18th century literature, mostly written by noble men and noble women, because they were the only ones who could actually read and write. And it was all about the domestication of nature, how great man was in his ability to tame nature and make it as convenient and beautiful as he or she wanted it to be. Things started changing somehow in the 18th century with French philosophers like Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who is one of the most recognized French philosophers that came up with this concept that is quite familiar to many people of the state of nature and the state of nurture. And I think that's some kind of a turning point in French literature. We are somehow drifting away from this romantic perception of nature, you know, just being pretty and domesticated, to the basis of a real concern about the impact of man on nature. And later on, with Romanticism, there was another kind of connection between man and nature that we could see, especially in poetry, with poets like Charles Baudelaire, that endowed nature with a soul, and there was some sort of communication between the soul of nature and the human soul. And that's it for France, because as far as contemporary literature is concerned, I'm quite sad to say that you know, having majored in English and American literature, there is way more to find in that respect than in French literature, which is still about society, still about the people. And if there's any storyline about the relationship between man and nature, it's only in the background. And if I have to answer all the questions about this relationship between man and nature, I would have to dig into British literature or American literature rather than French literature.
Thank you for sharing your side of the story where you're talking about the relation between men and nature. And on these lines, I would also want to add about Gujarati verbal literature, because I have that background. And I remember singing this as a child, like, Avare varshat, dhebariyo parshat, uni uni rotli ne karelanu shak. Well, this is something we used to sing as children to just welcome rain. Then we had another such a thing, ke chakki ben, mari sathe jamwa, avjo ke nahi. Like, here we're talking about sparrows, we're talking about rain, we talk about worshipping trees, and most of this literature is verbal literature. So I think here we can also talk about written literature, verbal literature, something which is passed on to us from one generation to another. Yeah. Anyone else who would want to?
If I may. So Irish, again, we were a colony. So we were colonized by the British 800, 900 odd years ago. So they had, well, by the English, but they had a huge influence on us. But before that, we had an oral literature, oral tradition. And many of our great oral stories, and especially our mythology, placed everyone in their locality, their nearest stream, their nearest mountain, their nearest valley, everywhere in the landscape had a name. And I think that sense of, still in Ireland, people are very rooted to the place where they're from, and naming every hill, every field is still very much part of the culture, and that really places you in your environment. And but moving on from them, when I first read about the topic's title, it was poetry that came to mind, and also how our poets, when it came to advocating for getting rid of the colonial powers, they really romanticized the landscape and nature, and it was our love of the land that was used as a motivator to try and expel these colonizers. And this went on for the last few hundred years. It wasn't just with Yeats and whoever nowadays, but it was that if you are at one with where you live, you must want to expel these people who don't love the place like you do, who don't essentially worship it like you do. I mean, there was a tradition even within Christianity in Ireland of recognizing, worshipping water, etc., but also recognizing God in nature, and that was something that really protected the environment. We also had a lot of stories about what bad things fairies, etc., would do to us if we didn't protect the environment, but that long tradition of respecting the environment and of being very sure of where you were placed in the world, that's very strong in our literature.
Interesting. Yeah. Sir, you would like to add?
Hi everyone. So having heard from the other three panelists, what I can see is that there's a lot of universality in what we are speaking about, because we're talking about poems as the first go-to place as far as nature is concerned. And secondly, all of you talk about colonialism as a place where it came up in the forefront. But for India, it came way before that. We're talking about the Tamil poets in the Sangam era who wrote something called the Pattu Pattu. So basically it was 10 songs. And in that what they're doing is they are not talking about nature as a separate entity ever. It's somehow so interwoven with the way that we live that it becomes a soft influence on what human beings do and what human beings are doing to nature. So there was a reverence with which nature was looked at. And if there was an irreverence, there was a reciprocation to that. And this started way back in the Sangam era, where the first structured poetry of Tolkapian came into being. So from the oral tradition, when we went into written also, we are talking about a nature that is a force to reckon with, but it has to be carefully dealt with, because it is all-powerful without it being all-powerful. So that subtlety was something that defined the poetry and the way that nature is seen at that particular time. Just to give an idea of how this was done and I'm giving a very rough translation here of a Tamil poetry. It says, "Their love for us is great, and they just can't bear it. Friend, those fruit-shedding hills of his will weep waterfalls of tears." So every comparison that is being made of a human emotion is reflected in nature. And this was way back in the Sangam era. So even at that time, we were talking about a reverence to nature and how it reciprocates back into human experiences. So that, I think, is universal across the world in terms of literature.
Thank you for beautifully weaving in South Indian literature into this forum. Well, to just talk about the impact of literature on nature and cultural heritage, I would just like to refer to Rudyard Kipling. Like, he was a British author, and I think that his literature, specifically the Jungle Book, is something that we have read even, or like kids, even in remote areas of India, have read, loved, and they've learnt about nature through this literature. So this was just a reference, but if you would like to elaborate on how literature has played a role in impacting people's perception towards nature, or even in conserving nature, any of you?
I think I'll start. I mean, it's going this way.
That wasn't a tough question.
So again, this concept of there's a dichotomy in the way that we look at nature. So a lot of literature is written where we are in awe of nature, right? Nature is something that we look up to from a point of view of religion, of worshipping and all. And then there is this absolute cavalier nature that we have towards, a perception towards nature, which gets back to us. So you have a lot of post-apocalyptic literature that has come from across the world, and not just recently, from time immemorial, where even in 1902 people are writing about what would happen if you don't take care of nature. So I think to answer your question, nature is being looked at, and human beings are being told, take care or else. And since people have started writing, and since world literatures have become more popular, everybody is talking about that. Everybody is talking about take care of nature, otherwise there's doomsday. That's right there. And it is then left up to the humans to select which one we want to take up. Do we want to take up the one where we have this reverence, or we have this irreverence towards nature? It depends on how we took it.
I suppose when it comes to the influence of literature on my love of nature and heritage, and I was inspired by listening to, well, what I could understand of the session beforehand, I suddenly started remembering all the children's literature that I had loved, that involved the characters developing a love of nature, whether it was the wild, like finding out what fruits to eat, what nuts to eat, whatever, living, camping wild in nature, things like that, or just nature landscape presented as somewhere to feel fully human. That in the wilds of a landscape, that's when you can be most in touch with who you are as a person. Kind of a meditative space, nearly, wild open spaces. And in Ireland, we're a bit obsessed with the sea. We're an island nation, huge coastline, and the sea is all powerful. The Atlantic Ocean is pounding against our shores. It is providing food, but it's also always, at any moment, it can turn not against you, but it just shows how insignificant you are. And I suppose for me, the influence of literature, whether children's or adults or whatever, is not that you are threatened by nature and we better, sort ourselves out. It's that it helped to grow my love of nature, and therefore, of course, I want to look after and cherish something that I've enjoyed and love. Why wouldn't I want my natural heritage to continue on? Because it's something that's brought me so much joy. It's not, I don't feel that it's a sort of a threat, that looking after nature is a joy and that we should all be sharing. Sorry, I'm a terrible romantic.
And listen, just to add to what you were saying, I mean, it's just so meditative to listen to you. I mean, just yes, please.
I'll carry on a probably less contemplative and positive note with the connection between conserving our natural heritage and literature. What struck me most in modern literature is how popular the dystopian genre is developing, and you were referring to it as sending the readers a very strong message as to what could happen in the near future if we don't act now. And once more, there are many examples to be taken from English-speaking literature. I'm thinking about The Handmaid's Tale, for example, where you've got this very interesting part where nature has its revenge on humankind, because humans have been overexploiting natural resources, and now the whole world is suffering from toxic waste, etc., which makes people infertile. So it's like, it's nature's revenge on humankind for mistreating it throughout the years. And there's also this specific genre that is called cli-fi, climate fiction. Thinking about an English book called The Carbon Diaries that shares a vision of a world where, well, most natural resources are extinct, and that people have to survive and, sort of manage with drastic restrictions that challenges their ways of lives and even their survivals. So that's how conserving the human heritage resonates with me in terms of contemporary literature.
The Carbon Diaries, that's the book you mentioned, right? I mean, for all the people who haven't read the book, I think that's the book we can refer to for learning more about natural heritage, right? Yeah. You want to?
Yes, I opted to go last because I was very interested in everyone's responses. And I would say I would agree with, or definitely, Nitin, I think you're right. I think, if you're talking about literature in response to nature or the environment, it would fall into people who observe nature, like writers who observe nature, or writers who engage in some kind of environmental activism, or again, writers who are in a sense of awe, traditionally. But of course, you can probably add the dystopian response as well. And I would probably, in contemporary literature, and not only in Australia, I would say there is a move towards the Anthropocene as well. So looking, like you were saying, Alison, looking at yourself not as separate to nature, but as like a species that is, you know, part of the world's ecosystem. And so again, with this dynamic connection to nature isn't just as someone, as you know, a realm of beings who is higher than nature, but actually actively involved in nature. And I think as the human race has progressed, of course, civilization